the mind, the higher consciousness, it's the closest thing to the divine. It's that part of us that we separated from, we descended down to have this earthly experience, according to the Theosophists. Hello and welcome to Tracing the Circle. Welcome back to Tracing the Circle. I hope everyone enjoyed the holiday season and that you spent Christmas with the people you love or in a place which filled you with warmth, and that you went into the new year with courage, renewed strength, and spirit. The world around us seems to be in chaos, and we need now more than ever to find presence and peace within us, within our environment and the people we share our lives with. Even where there is a lot of work to be done in your environment, your mind, and within your loved ones, even if in certain ways or in certain areas it's chaotic or unhealed, there is peace. You can find peace within the broken and within the chaos in small moments. Those moments give us the energy we need to make it through the various levels and missions of the adventure we call our life. I took a small hiatus from all of this over the holidays. I had my first Christmas back home in Ireland in over 10 years. I also traveled back home to Mallorca a couple of times, not necessarily for leisure, but out of duty and out of love. I have faced many things I've been avoiding for a long time, and I suppose that's the theme of this new era of my life, as especially as I share with you all here, everything I've been keeping to myself in my very private and personal life, my struggles with the shadow world, and my very intimate relationship with the spiritual, which, to those who were not close to me, was almost imperceptible. I am back though, and we will be doing something a little different this time. I have not had the time or the energy, to be honest, to write something for everyone the last couple of months, as I'm only now settling into my new apartment, which to everyone's relief has much better heating. But I was inspired to do this episode by a couple of books I picked up in my grandfather's library. That's Donovan's library, for those of you who might be fans. Some of the chapters really reflected the last episode we did on Adeptship, and so I would like to read them to you. The first book is Knowledge of the Higher Worlds by Rudolph Steiner. The second is a little but very powerful book called The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran. Kahlil Gibran. I don't know how to pronounce it properly, but he is one of the most famous Arabic poets in the world. I believe he is from Jordan or Iran. I will also be reading from a couple of books from my own collection. A very small segment, let's say more of a quote. No, it's a segment. I'm reading a segment from the Red Book, which might not be easily understood. At least my intention with sharing it in this context might not be easily understood at first, but I will do my best in giving a description of this intention at the very end of the episode. And last but certainly not least, I will be reading a significant portion from The Voice of the Silence. These are all, at least Steiner and Helena Blavatsky. Who else was I reading? Carl Jung are all in some way or another great masters and adepts in their own right. And I mean, I don't really know who Kahlil Gibran is. I picked up this little book because it looked very curious, and the first page was very moving to me. But to write what he has written, I believe you have to be in some way on the path of adeptship, whether it's conscious or not, whether it's something in the spirit, which actually reflects on a comment I received on one of the episodes about my interest in the occult and figures like Manly Palmer Hall. A lot of people, especially conspiracy people, they believe that these people, because of their involvement in the occult, must have been satanic or involved in the New World Order in some way or another, maybe because they have connections to Freemasonry or just in general in the conspiracy world, especially in the Christian world, the symbols that they use and things like that. And I would just like to say that I don't think it's possible for someone like Manly Palmer Hall to write the things that he writes. And I will give you some examples of these in future episodes that are just absolutely mind-blowing is not the word. They move the inner, deepest depths of the soul and bring out inspiration towards the divine, the truly good in this world. They bring out inspiration toward love. I don't believe that someone can write those things or write The Voice of the Silence and be involved in the satanic cult that does terrible and awful things to children and on the world stage in geopolitics. I do not believe that people who write those things are capable of doing such terrible things. On the other hand, I know from personal experience that these terrible kinds of people surround the enlightened. They surround the good. They surround the beautiful. They surround beauty, even in the sense of moving to places in the world where it's full of light and beauty. It's not just the good people who are attracted to those places, it's the bad people because they feel the power, they feel the energy. Manly Hall, for example, did have very many shady figures around him, but he had the terrible disposition of always seeing the good in everyone and trusting God to guide him in the right direction. In fact, I believe one of his ex-wives left him for this very reason, that he was not able to discern who his friends were and who his enemies were, and this bothered her. Anyway, that isn't to say that people who do terrible and evil things are not capable of writing beautiful and moving things. Of course not. But we're not just talking about beautiful and moving things, are we? We're talking about the mission of the soul and connection to the divine and to God. And it's only through getting to know their works can you really discern this for yourself. So I highly recommend reading as much as possible before you develop superstitious, judgmental opinions because of things that have circulated on the internet by people who have every right to be paranoid and suspicious of figures within the occult. Now, continuing, as usual, any and all criticism of the show is not only welcome but encouraged. Please leave any questions you have in the comments and I will try to answer some of them in the next episode. Thanks again for all of my new followers and the incredible support and wonderful messages that I have gotten from so many of you. Really, it's been a huge, unexpected turnout for me, and I am incredibly grateful to you all. Let's begin. I just realized I forgot to go over this book to figure out which chapter. I did with all the other ones except the main event. So I'm gonna have to pause. This is oregano from Sicily. Very powerful stuff. The smell, anyway. With some nettle that I harvested last year. This was full. Now I've got, I think, 1 cup left. Just thought I would share this with you all to encourage good, healthy habit of tea drinking among my followers. And of course, some honey, because whether you like it or not, which my partner does not, it's medicinal. It's very good for you. This is 1969 edition. The original is from 1923. This would have been one of the books that my grandfather used for inspiration in writing his songs. In fact, there are little pencil lines underneath various sentences. Some of the lines seem to be just under particular words that he may have been compiling for his poetry. It's a beautiful book. Chapter 1, I suppose. How is knowledge of the higher worlds achieved? In every human being there slumbers faculties by means of which he can acquire for himself a knowledge of higher worlds. The mystic, the Gnostic, the Theosophist have always spoken of a world of soul and a world of spirit, which are just as real to them as the world we can see with physical eyes and touch with physical hands. Anyone who listens to them may at every moment say to himself, that of which they speak, I too can know, if I develop certain powers which today still slumber within me. It can only be a matter of how to set to work to develop such faculties. Guidance on them can be given only by those who already possess such powers. As long as the human race has existed, there has always been training, in the course of which individuals possessed of the higher faculties gave guidance to those who were seeking for them. Such training is called esoteric training, and the instruction received is called esoteric or occult instruction. The ways by which a man is made ready for the reception of a mystery are laid down with all exactitude. The direction he is to take is inscribed with indelible, eternal letters in the worlds of spirit, where the initiates guard the higher mysteries. In ancient times, anterior to our history, the temples of the spirit were outwardly visible. Today, when our life has become so unspiritual, they are not to be found in the world open to external sight, but spiritually they are present everywhere, and everyone who seeks can find them. Only within his own soul can a man find the means whereby the lips of the initiates will be unsealed for him. He must develop certain faculties to a definite and high degree, and then the sublime treasures of the spirit can become his own. A certain fundamental attitude of the soul must be the starting point. The spiritual investigator calls this fundamental attitude the path of veneration, of devotion to truth and knowledge. And without this fundamental attitude, no one can become an occult pupil. I repeat, a certain fundamental attitude of the soul must be the starting point. The spiritual investigator calls this fundamental attitude the path of veneration, of devotion to truth and knowledge. Veneration means great respect, reverence, deep respect for someone or something. Without this fundamental attitude, no one can become an occult pupil. Anyone who's experienced in this domain knows what aptitudes are shown already in their childhood by those who later on become occult pupils. There are children who look up with reverent awe to certain venerated persons. Their reverence for these people forbids them, even in the deepest depths of their hearts, to admit any thought of criticism or opposition. Such children grow up into young men and women who feel happy when they are able to look up to anything that fills them with veneration. Many occult pupils come from the ranks of such children. If you have ever stood outside the door of some revered person, and on this your first visit had a feeling of awe as you pressed the door handle to enter the room, which for you was a holy place, a feeling has come to expression within you, which may be the seed of your later discipleship. It is a blessing for every maturing human being to have such feelings as foundations within them. But it must not be thought that this will lead to submissiveness and servility. What was once childlike veneration for persons becomes later on a veneration for truth and knowledge. Experience teaches that those of free bearing are those who have learnt to venerate where veneration is due, and veneration is due whenever it springs from the depths of the heart. I'd just like to say that this person for me growing up was my mother. My mother inspired in me a feeling of divine devotion and even worship, and not in like a weird or gross way. I truly saw her beauty, her truth, and her pain. It's only in recent years that I've started to see her as, more human, which is quite sad because I miss viewing her as this divine object of veneration, this goddess-like being who could do no wrong, despite the fact that she made many very terrible decisions. Everything was justified because I could see that she was on this path toward the truth within her own heart, and that she was pure in everything that she did. She was pure and that she was led by love, and I could see that from the earliest age. She has been my biggest inspiration in life for my quest toward truth and healing and compassion. If we do not develop within ourselves the deeply rooted feeling that there is something higher than ourselves, we shall never find the strength to evolve to a higher stage. The initiate has acquired the strength to lift his head to the heights of knowledge only by guiding his heart to the depths of veneration and devotion. The heights of the spirit can be scaled only by passing through the gateway of humility. You can acquire true knowledge only when you have learnt to respect it. Man has certainly the right to turn his eyes to the light, but he must first earn this right. There are laws in the spiritual life just as there are in material life. Rub a glass rod with an appropriate substance and it becomes electrified. That is, it acquires the power to attract small objects. This is a law of nature, known to everyone who has learned a little physics. Similarly, acquaintance with the elementary rudiments of spiritual science brings the realization that every feeling of true devotion harbored in the soul develops a power which leads sooner or later to a further stage of knowledge. Whoever has within him feelings of true devotion, or who is fortunate enough to have them inculcated by a fitting education, brings a great deal with him when later in life he seeks access to higher knowledge. Failing such preparation, he will encounter difficulties at the very first step, unless he undertakes by rigorous self-education to engender within himself this attitude of devotion. In our time, it is of the utmost importance that full attention be paid to this. Our civilization tends more to criticism, judgment, condemnation, than to devotion and selfless veneration. Our children already criticize far more than they revere, but every criticism, every adverse judgment passed, dispels the powers of the soul for the attainment of higher knowledge, just as reverent veneration develops these powers. This is not meant to imply anything against our civilization. There is no question here of leveling criticism against it. To this critical faculty, this conscious sense of human judgment, this principle of prove all things and hold fast what is best, we owe the greatness of our culture. Man could never have developed the science, industry, commerce, civil rights of our time if he had not everywhere exercised his critical faculty and applied the standards of his judgment. But what we have thereby gained in the way of external culture, we have had to pay with a corresponding forfeiture of higher knowledge, of spiritual life. It must be emphasized that in the domain of higher knowledge, it is not a matter of venerating persons, but of venerating knowledge and truth. We must clearly recognize, of course, that for an individual wholly involved in the externalized civilization of our day, it is very difficult to attain knowledge of the higher worlds. He can do so only if he works energetically on himself. In times when the conditions of material life were simple, the attainment of spiritual knowledge was easier. Whatever was worthy of veneration and reverence stood out in stronger relief from the things of the everyday world. In an epoch where criticism is universal, ideals are lowered. Other feelings take the place of veneration, reverence, worship, and wonder. Our age thrusts these feelings more and more into the background so that in everyday life they play a very small part. Whoever seeks higher knowledge must bring them to life in himself. He must himself instill them into his soul. This cannot be done through study. It can be done only through living. Whoever wishes to become a pupil of higher knowledge must therefore assiduously cultivate this attitude of devotion. Everywhere in his environment and his experience, he must look for whatever can capture his admiration and respect. If I encounter a human being and blame him for his weakness, I rob myself of the power of higher knowledge. But if I try to enter lovingly into his qualities, I muster this power. The pupil must bear this advice constantly in mind. Experienced spiritual investigators know how much power they owe to the circumstance, that ever and again they look for the good in all things and withhold critical judgment. Now, if you remember the previous episode, this will sound very similar to what was spoken about there. We must clearly recognize, of course, that for an individual wholly involved in the externalized civilization of our day, it is very difficult to attain knowledge of the higher worlds. He can do so only if he works energetically on himself. In times when the conditions of material life were simple, the attainment of spiritual knowledge was easier. Whatever was worthy of veneration and reverence stood out in stronger relief from the things of the everyday world. In an epoch where criticism is universal, ideals are lowered. Other feelings take the place of veneration, reverence, worship, and wonder. Our age thrusts these feelings more and more into the background, so that in everyday life they play a very small part. Whoever seeks higher knowledge must bring them to life in himself. He must himself instill them into his soul. This cannot be done through study. It can be done only through living. Whoever wishes to become a pupil of higher knowledge must therefore assiduously cultivate this attitude of devotion everywhere in his environment. If I encounter a human being and blame him for his weaknesses, I rob myself of the power of higher knowledge. But if I try to enter lovingly into his qualities, I muster this power. The pupil must bear this advice constantly in mind. Experienced spiritual investigators know how much power they owe to the circumstance that ever and again they look for the good in all things and withhold critical judgment. Now, if you remember the previous episode and what was discussed there, this will all be sounding very familiar to you. I'll repeat that last sentence. Experienced spiritual investigators know how much power they owe to the circumstances that ever and again they look for the good in all things and withhold critical judgment. But this must not remain an external rule of life. It must lay hold of our inmost soul. Man has in his power to perfect himself and as time goes on completely to transform himself. But this transformation must take place in his inmost self, in his life of thought. It is not enough that I show respect to a person in my outward bearing. I must have this respect in my thoughts. The pupil must begin by bringing this devotion into his life of thought. He must be wary of thoughts of disrespect, of adverse criticism, and must endeavor straightway to cultivate thoughts of reverence. Every moment that we set ourselves to discover whatever remains in our consciousness in the way of adverse critical judgments of the world and of life, every such moment brings us nearer to a higher knowledge. And we make rapid progress when in such moments we fill our consciousness with thoughts that imbue us with wonder, respect, and veneration for the world and for life. Those experienced in these matters know that in every such moment, powers are awakened which otherwise remain dormant. About 13, 14 years ago, I suppose, I was at the peak of my sort of mini enlightenment, where I saw God and beauty everywhere, and life all around me was full of awe, and I felt deep veneration for all things because I could feel God speaking through all things and through all people and through all movements going on around me in the air and in the sky and in the streets. And I've been trying to get that feeling back ever since, because at a certain point the dark side of the world that we lived in was revealed to me in such an immense and intense way that it overtook me and consumed me. And I could no longer see God and beauty and veneration everywhere. I was consumed by thoughts of the darkness and the network of darkness that operates in plain sight all around us. And my main question has always been, how do I hold the knowledge of all of this darkness and not let it consume me? How do I hold the knowledge of all of this darkness and still see God everywhere all around me and have a heart full of veneration and awe? And it has been my quest the last 12 years to find the answer to that. And only now do I understand what the answer is, and only now am I beginning to integrate that answer into my life. Every moment that we set ourselves to discover whatever remains in our consciousness in the way of adverse critical judgments of the world and of life, every such moment brings us nearer to higher knowledge, and we make a rapid progress when in such moments we fill our consciousness with thoughts that imbue us with wonder, respect, and veneration for the world and for life. Those experienced in these matters know that in every such moment, powers are awakened, which otherwise remain dormant. Thereby, the spiritual eye of man are opened. He begins to see things around him which formerly he had been unable to see. He begins to realize that hitherto he has seen only a part of the world. The human being standing before him now wears a quite different aspect. Certainly this rule of life will not enable him to see what is described as the human aura. A still higher training is necessary for that, but he can fit himself for this higher training if he has previously undergone an unflagging training in devotional reverence. The treading of the path of knowledge by the pupil takes place silently, unnoticed by the outer world. No change need be noticed in him. He performs his duty and attends to his business as before. The transformation proceeds entirely in the inner recesses of the soul, hidden from the outer sight. At first, the pupil's whole inner life is irradiated by this basic mood of reverence for everything that is truly venerable. His whole life of soul finds its center in this one basic feeling. Just as the sun's rays vivify everything living, so does reverence in the pupil vivify all sentient experiences of the soul. Where I was getting at was that now that I've learned to start accepting all of this darkness that I've come to know in the world, I can replace this dysregulated nervous system that's full of fear, disgust, horror, rage with, for one, through the acceptance. For whatever reason, I bypass all of those feelings and I allow myself to feel sadness. Through the sadness, I can cry, and through the tears, I release. And Helena Blavatsky talks about how, actually, I have it here. Let each burning human teardrop on thy heart, and there remain, not ever brush it off until that pain that caused it is removed. These tears, O thou of heart most merciful, these are the streams that irrigate the fields of charity immortal. 'Tis on such soil that grows the midnight blossom of Buddha, more difficult to find and more rare to view than is the flower of the Voge tree. It is the seed of freedom from rebirth. So, let each burning human tear drop on thy heart, and there remain, not ever brush it off until that pain that caused it is removed. Through my acceptance of the horror, I allow myself to feel the sadness of what I have witnessed, rather than remain stifled in horror. And then after that acceptance, and after those tears, I am able to experience forgiveness and realize that I am one with all people, including those who commit terrible acts. And then from there, I can act from a place of reason rather than from a place of being dominated by negative emotions. And then from that position where I have attained this sort of balance and peace within myself regarding all of the things going on in the world, I can start to regain that devotional life, that veneration and that awe I had for God being alive in all things, and how I have missed such a feeling, how I have missed such a perception. And I realize that the only way back to that perception is through the initial gate of acceptance. The transformation proceeds entirely in the inner recesses of the soul, hidden from outer sight. At first, the pupil's whole inner life is irradiated by this basic mood of reverence for everything that is truly venerable. His whole life of soul finds its center in this one basic feeling. Just as the sun's rays vivify everything living, so does reverence in the pupil vivify all sentient experiences of the soul. It is not easy at first to believe that feelings such as those of reverence, respect, and so on have anything to do with cognition. This is because we are inclined to regard cognition as a faculty by itself, unrelated to other happenings in the soul. We forget that it is the soul which exercises the faculty of cognition, and feelings are for the soul what foodstuffs are for the body. If the body is given stones instead of bread, its activity will die away. So too with the soul. Veneration, respect, devotion are nourishing foodstuffs which make the soul healthy and vigorous, especially in the activity of cognition. Disrespect, antipathy, underestimation of what deserves recognition exert a paralyzing, withering effect on the faculty of cognition. For the spiritual investigator, this fact is visible in the aura. Take a look at what's happening in the world all around us. All of these dark things being revealed, as they were revealed to me 12 years ago. It has created so much superstition, so much fear, so much disgust, so much rage, a lot of dissociation, a lot of disconnection. It sent people into chaos. The truth has been revealed to us in a revelation of the method style by the very people who benefit from our feelings of fear and disgust and rage, and our superstition of the other, of the Christian or of the Muslim or of the leftist or of the conservative. All of this has set us in this direction of being dominated by negative emotions and superstitions. And so I think it's really, really important, this discussion on cultivating feelings of reverence and devotion. And of course, our emotional reactions to all of the things being revealed to us now are justified, but they are not necessarily helpful in the long run. Let's say that they are precursors to something greater if we choose to open ourselves up to it. The soul that cultivates feelings of reverence and devotion brings about a change in its aura. Certain spiritual colorings, as they may be called, yellowish red, brownish red in tone, give way to bluish red tints. Thereby, the faculty of cognition opens. It receives knowledge of facts in its environment, of which previously it had no inkling. Reverence awakens a power of sympathy in the soul, through which we draw towards us qualities in the beings around us, qualities which would otherwise remain concealed. What can be achieved through devotion becomes still more effective when another trend of feeling is added. The individual learns to give himself up less and less to impressions of the outer world, and to develop instead an active inner life. A person who darts from one impression of the outer world to another, who is all the time looking for distraction, does not find the way to occult science. The pupil must not blunt himself to the outer world, but be guided by his rich inner life in yielding himself to its impressions. When traveling through a beautiful mountain landscape, a man with depths of soul and wealth of feeling has experiences different from those who is inwardly apathetic. Only what we experience within ourselves gives us the key to the beauties of the outer world. One person will sail across the sea, and little in the way of experience passes through his soul. Another hears the eternal language of the cosmic spirit. Mysterious riddles of creation disclose themselves to him. We must learn how to make the best use of our own feelings and ideas if we want to develop a fruitful relationship with the outer world in all its phenomenon. The outer world is filled with divine splendor. But we must first have experienced the divine within ourselves if we are ever to discover it in the surrounding world. Now, I think it's appropriate that I read next the excerpt from the Red Book, because it touches on some of the worldly horrors which I was getting at just now in my commentary on the Steiner book. Great way to understand darkness in our world and to be more understanding of our fellow man is to pick up the book The Lucifer Effect. Understanding How Good People Turn Evil by Philip Zimbardo. Highly recommend. Now, this is a big boy here. And we will be opening to page 239. Do with that number what you will. Do I have the book backwards? 239 in the Liber Primus. I would not have been able to see what was to come if I could not have seen it in myself. Therefore, I take part in that murder. The sun of the depths also shines in me after the murder has been accomplished. The 1,000 serpents that want to devour the sun are also in me. I myself am a murderer and murdered, sacrificer and sacrificed. The upwelling blood streams out of me. As the fate of the people is represented to you in events, so will it happen in your heart. If the hero in you is slain, then the sun of the depths rises in you, glowing from afar and from a dreadful place. But all the same, everything that up till now seemed to be dead in you will come to life and will change into poisonous serpents that will cover the sun, and you will fall into night and confusion. Your blood also will stream from many wounds in this frightful struggle. Your shock and doubt will be great, but from such torment the new life will be born. Birth is blood and torment. Your darkness, which you did not suspect since it was dead, will come to life, and you will feel the crush of total evil and the conflicts of life that still now lie buried in the matter of your body. But the serpents are dreadful, evil thoughts and feelings. You thought you knew that abyss, oh, you clever people. It is another thing to experience it. Everything will happen to you. Think of all the frightful and devilish things that men have inflicted on their brothers, that should happen to you in your heart. Suffer it yourself through your own hand, and know that it is your own heinous and devilish hand that inflicts the suffering on you, but not your brother, who wrestles with his own devils. To me, this speaks on the collective consciousness all going through this dark revelation happening in the world now. And I will repeat one more time Let not the fierce sun dry one tear of pain before thyself has wiped it from the sufferer's eye. But let each burning human tear drop on thy heart and there remain, nor ever brush it off until that pain that caused it is removed. Think of all the frightful and devilish things that men have inflicted on their brothers, that should happen to you in your heart. Suffer it yourself through your own hand, and know that it is your own heinous and devilish hand that inflicts the suffering on you, but not your brother, who wrestles with his own devils. Who is your brother, but not the man who causes suffering and pain in this world? These are our brothers and sisters, whether we like it or not. I almost forgot this incredible quote that I just read you from the Red Book. Reminded me that I was going to read you a piece from the Prophet. It was on page 42, I think. Then one of your judges of the city stood forth and said, "Speak to us of crime and punishment." And he answered, saying, he being the prophet of the book, "It is when your spirit goes wandering upon the wind that you alone and unguarded commit a wrong unto others, and therefore unto yourself. And for that wrong committed must you knock and wait a while unheeded at the gate of the blessed. Like the ocean is your God self. It remains forever undefiled, and like the ether it lifts but the winged. Even like the sun is your God's self. It knows not the ways of the mole, nor seeks it the holes of the serpent. But your God's self dwells not alone in your being. Much in you is still man, and much in you is not yet man, but a shapeless pygmy that walks asleep in the mist, searching for its own awakening. And of the man in you would I now speak, for it is he, and not your God self, not the pygmy in the mist, that knows crime and the punishment of crime. Oftentimes have I heard you speak of one who commits a wrong, as though he were not one of you, but a stranger unto you, and an intruder upon your world. But I say that even as the holy and the righteous cannot rise beyond the highest which is in each one of you, so the wicked and the weak cannot fall lower than the lowest which is in you also. And as a single leaf turns not yellow, but with the silent knowledge of the whole tree, so the wrongdoer cannot do wrong without the hidden will of you all. Like a procession, you walk together towards your God self. You are the way and the wayfarers. And when one of you falls down, he falls for those behind him, a caution against the stumbling stone. Aye, and he falls for those ahead of him, who though faster and surer of foot, yet removed not the stumbling stone. And this also, though the world lie heavy upon your hearts, the murdered is not unaccountable for his own murder, and the robbed is not blameless in being robbed. The righteous is not innocent of the deeds of the wicked, and the white-handed is not clean in the doings of the felon. Yea, the guilty is oftentimes the victim of the injured, and still more often the condemned is the burden-bearer of the guiltless and unblamed, such as is the scapegoat. You cannot separate the just from the unjust and the good from the wicked, for they stand together before the face of the sun, even as the black thread and the white are woven together. And when the black thread breaks, the weaver shall look into the whole cloth, and he shall examine the loom also. If any of you would bring to judgment the unfaithful wife, let him also weigh the heart of her husband in scales, and measure his soul with the measurements. And measure his soul with measurements. And let him who would lash the offender look unto the spirit of the offended. And if any of you would punish in the name of righteousness, and lay the axe unto the evil tree, let him see to its roots. And verily, he will find the roots of the good and the bad, the fruitful and the fruitless, all entwined together in the silent heart of the earth. And you, judges, who would be just, what judgment pronounce you upon him who, though honest in the flesh, yet is a thief in spirit? What penalty lay you upon him who slays in the flesh, yet is himself slain in the spirit? And how prosecute you him who in action is a deceiver and an oppressor, yet who also is aggrieved and outraged? And how shall you punish those whose remorse is already greater than their misdeeds? Is not remorse the justice which is administered by that very law which you would fain serve? Yet you cannot lay remorse upon the innocent, nor lift it from the heart of the guilty. Unbidden shall it call in the night, that men may wake and gaze upon themselves. And you who would understand justice, how shall you unless you look upon all deeds in the fullness of light? Only then shall you know that the erect and the fallen are but one man standing in twilight between the night of his pygmy self and the day of his God self, and that the cornerstone of the temple is not higher than the lowest stone in its foundation. I watched a movie the other day, probably one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. And although it had some elements to it that were just really, some propaganda elements that really bothered me, the overall film was beautiful. And there was a quote from the protagonist, who is a priest. It went something along the lines of, the ones who need God's grace and mercy the most are the sinners. The camera died, and a bunch of other stuff happened. So a couple of days have passed. But I'm going to carry on. I hope this isn't too disturbing. I'll keep it short, the interlude. And I will start reading the first part of Voice of the Silence by Helena Blavatsky. Now, I looked back at the last part of me being so deeply moved by the crime and punishment section from the prophet, which, to give you some context, he is a prophet, and a ship is coming to this land that he's been living in, that he is a foreigner to, but he has lived there for many years, and he's come to know everyone personally in the village. And the ship is coming, and he's looking out across the sea, and he's going to finally return home, which he's very happy about, obviously. And then he goes down to the village and says goodbye to everyone, and everyone doesn't want him to go because of the wisdom that he holds. So all of these people ask him questions. A wise woman asks him questions. The lawyers and the doctors ask him questions. The judges ask him questions. Children ask him questions. Each one has a different question attaining to different areas of life within ourselves and within civilization. And that one little section on crime and punishment really spoke to me and connected in with what Carl Jung was saying. So why? Why does it move me so deeply, this concept? It brings me, obviously, to near tears, and it's not that I'm somehow viewing evil or a person who has committed evil acts as innocent or deserving of some kind of special treatment. He said, I can somehow feel this timeless, ageless whisper of all human suffering, all human folly, and the dominoes that fell, and the butterfly effect that ricocheted throughout the centuries. All of the cries of pain and feelings of vice simultaneously echoing through me in that moment. And there's no need to conceptualize it at this point. At this point, all the evil and all those who suffered it ignite a deep sadness within me, a sadness of knowing and understanding, an understanding within my heart rather than within my mind. Finally, understanding that which cannot be understood, the seed of human evil. If you're on the mystical path or the path toward adeptship, many wonderful and beautiful trials will come to you that will awaken your inner knowing. But at some point in each of our lives, especially now on a global scale, we descend into the darkness, into hell. And if we cannot make it through this passage, we have missed a step on the ladder to godhood, which is itself adeptship. To move in the world and upon the world as God would, as God does, in human form. All-encompassing wisdom guiding our every step, full of veneration. I have a couple of quotes here from Plotinus, who touches on this. And as he reaches to loftier principles and other standards, these in turn will define his conduct. For example, restraint in its earlier form will no longer satisfy him. He will work for the final disengagement. He will live no longer the human life of the good man, such as civic virtue commends, but leaving this beneath him, will take up instead another life, that of the gods. For it is to the gods, not to the good, that our likeness must look. To model ourselves upon good men is to produce an image of an image. We have to fix our gaze above the image and attain likeness to the supreme exemplar. Beautiful, perfect. Now, I'm reading the first part of Voice of the Silence because, for one, it demonstrates the initial steps of adeptship in poetic language from the Eastern perspective, and it's very moving, but also because it presents to me, or at least it presented to me, a contradiction in the first section. And I'll show you that contradiction now. First page, page 3. Page 3, 15. When to the world's turmoil thy budding soul lends ear, when to the roaring voice of the great illusion thy soul responds, when frightened at the sight of the hot tears of pain, and when deafened by the cries of distress, thy soul withdraws like thy shy turtle within the carapace of selfhood. Learn, O disciple, of her silent God, thy soul is an unworthy shrine. This I declare, O disciple, that thy soul is caught in the webs of delusion. Now this talks about lending your ear to the hot tears of pain of the world, right? And then the next line on page 11, next paragraph, wonderful numbers. It goes on to say, let not the fierce sun dry one tear of pain before thyself has wiped it from the sufferer's eye, but let each burning human teardrop on thy heart and there remain, nor ever brush it off until that the pain that caused it is removed. These tears, O thou of heart most merciful, these are the streams that irrigates the field of charity immortal. Now, that sounds a little bit like everything will happen to you. Think of all the frightful and devilish things that men have inflicted on their brothers. That should happen to you in your heart. Same, but different. Tell me if you know where that movie quote comes from. So, I have read this over and over for years, and it has puzzled me, even though on a deeper level I understood it. Now that understanding has come out and I have remembered it, the first paragraph depicts a human being who is caught up in the realm of the senses, dominated by emotion, being led by emotion. The second paragraph is talking about a human being who's moving in the higher dimensional realm of the heart, so not dominated by the lower vibratory emotions. Beings living in the higher dimensional worlds, they don't experience emotions. They do experience the heart. So love is not just an emotion. It's something that transcends our astral bodies, which are the bodies of emotion that are deeply wound up and connected to our physical bodies. So, I'm going to start. Fragment 1, dedicated to the few. This is the version of the book that doesn't have all of the notes, so I can't explain the various obscure words to you. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it, and you'll take from it what you will. Fragment 1. These instructions are for those ignorant of the dangers of the lower Idi. He who would hear the voice of nada, the soundless sound, and comprehend it, he has to learn the nature of dharana. Having become indifferent to objects of perception, the pupil must seek out the Raja of the senses, the thought producer, he who awakens illusion. The mind is the great slayer of the real. Let the disciple slay the slayer. For when to himself his form appears unreal, as do on waking all the forms he sees in dreams. When he has ceased to hear the many, he may discern the one, the inner sound which kills the outer. Then only, not till then, shall he forsake the region of Asat, the false, to come unto the realm of Sat, the true. Before the soul can see, the harmony within must be attained. The harmony within must be attained. Franz Bardon. The balancing out of the elements within the body and mind, balancing out the various aspects of our personality. The black and white soul mirrors. Before the soul can see, the harmony within must be attained, and fleshy eyes be rendered blind to all illusion. Before the soul can hear, the image, man, has to become as deaf to roarings as to whispers, to cries of bellowing elephants, as to the silvery buzzing of the golden firefly. Before the soul can comprehend and may remember, she must unto the silent speaker be united. Just as the form to which the clay is modeled is first united with the potter's mind. For then the soul will hear and will remember, and then to the inner ear will speak the voice of the silence, and say, if thy soul smiles while bathing in the sunlight of thy life, if thy soul sings within her chrysalis of flesh and matter, if thy soul weeps inside her castle of illusion, if thy soul struggles to break the silver thread that binds her to the master, know, O disciple, thy soul is of the earth. When to the world's turmoil thy budding soul lends ear, when to the roaring voice of the great illusion thy soul responds, when frightened at the sight of the hot tears of pain, when deafened by the cries of distress thy soul withdraws like the shy turtle within the carapace of selfhood. Learn, O disciple, of her silent God, thy soul is an unworthy shrine. When waxing stronger thy soul glides forth from her secure retreat, and breaking loose from the protecting shrine extends her silver thread and rushes onwards. When beholding her image on the waves of space she whispers, this is I. Declare, O disciple, that thy soul is caught in the webs of delusion. This earth, disciple, is the hall of sorrow, wherein are set along the path of dire probations traps to ensnare thy ego by the delusion called great heresy. This earth, O ignorant disciple, is but the dismal entrance leading to the twilight that precedes the valley of true light. That light which no wind can extinguish, that light which burns without a wick or fuel. Saith the great law, in order to become the knower of all self, thou hast first of self to be the knower. To reach the knowledge of that self, thou hast to give up self to non-self, being to non-being, and then thou canst repose between the wings of the great bird. Aye, sweet is rest between the wings of that which is not born nor dies, but is the Aum throughout eternal ages. Bestride the bird of life if thou wouldest know. Give up thy life if thou wouldest live. 3 halls, O weary pilgrim, lead to the end of toils. 3 halls, O conqueror of Mara, illusion, or Maya, will bring thee through the states, through 3 states, into the 4th, and thence into the 7 worlds, the worlds of rest eternal. If thou wouldest learn their names, then hearken and remember. The name of the first hall is ignorance, avidya. It is the hall in which thou sawest the light, in which thou livest and shalt die. The name of hall the second is the hall of learning. In it thy soul will find the blossoms of life, but under every flower a serpent coiled. The name of the third hall is wisdom, beyond which stretch the shoreless waters of Akshara, the indestructible fount of omniscience. If thou wouldest cross the first hall safely, let not thy mind mistake the fires of lust that burn therein for the sunlight of life. If thou wouldest cross the second safely, stop not the fragrance of its stupefying blossoms to inhale. If freed thou wouldest be from the karmic chain, seek not for thy guru in those Mayavic regions. The wise ones tarry not in pleasure grounds of the senses. The wise ones heed not the sweetened tongue voices of illusion. Seek for him who is to give thee birth in the hall of wisdom, the hall which lies beyond, wherein all shadows are unknown, and where the light of truth shines with unfading glory. That which is uncreate abides in thee, disciple, as it abides in that hall. If thou wouldest reach it and blend the two, thou must divest thyself of thy dark garments of illusion, stifle the voice of flesh, allow no image of the senses to get between its light and thine, that thus the twain may blend in one. And having learnt thine own, ajnana, flee from the hall of learning. This hall is dangerous in its perfidious beauty, is needed but for thy probation. Beware, Lanu, disciple, lest dazzled by elusive radiance, thy soul should linger and be caught in its deceptive light. This light shines from the jewel of the great ensnarer, Mara. The senses it bewitches, blinds the mind, and leaves the unwary an abandoned wreck. The moth, attracted to the dazzling flame of thy night lamp, is doomed to perish in the viscid oil. The unwary soul that fails to grapple with the mocking demon of illusion will return to the earth the slave of Mara. Behold the hosts of souls, watch how they hover over the stormy sea of human life, and how exhausted, bleeding, broken-winged, they drop one after other on the swelling waves, tossed by the fierce winds, chased by the gale, they drift into the eddies and disappear within the first great vortex. Back into life. If through the hall of wisdom thou wouldest reach the veil of bliss, disciple, close fast thy senses against the great dire heresy of separateness that weans thee from the rest. If through the hall of wisdom thou wouldest reach the veil of bliss, disciple, close fast thy senses against the great dire heresy of separateness that weans thee from the rest. Let not thy heaven-born, merged in the sea of Maya, break from the universal parent, soul, in brackets. But let the fiery power retire into the inmost chamber, the chamber of the heart, and the abode of the world's mother. All of them go back to the same thing: veneration, the heart, respect, awe, devotion. All of them, from Blavatsky to Steiner to Plotinus to Plato, thousands of years. And this is ancient Eastern teachings. Then from the heart that power shall rise into the sixth, the middle region, the place between thine eyes, when it becomes the breath of the one soul, the voice which filleth all thy master's voice. That is the place of reason. It's my own commentary. 'Tis only then thou canst become a walker of the sky, who treads the winds above the waves, whose step touches not the waters. Before thou set thy foot upon the ladder's upper rung, the ladder of the mystic sounds, thou hast to hear the voice of the inner God in 7 manners. The first is like the nightingale's sweet voice chanting a song of parting to its mate. The second comes as the sound of a silver cymbal of the Dianis awakening the twinkling stars. The next is as the plaint melodious of the ocean sprite imprisoned in its shell. And this is followed by the chant of Vinya. The fifth like sound of bamboo flute shrills in thine ear. It changes next into a trumpet blast. The last vibrates like the dull rumbling of a thundercloud. The seventh swallows all the other sounds. They die, and then are heard no more. When the 6 are slain and at the master's feet are laid, then is the pupil merged into the one, becomes that one, and lives therein. Before that path is entered, thou must destroy thy lunar body, cleanse thy mind body, and make clean thy heart. Eternal life's pure waters, clear and crystal, with the monsoon's tempests, muddy torrents cannot mingle. There are multiple layers of interpretation to this. There are emotional and physical interpretations. One of them could be that these are instructions for outer body experience. But I can see that it's also instructing you to slay thy lunar body, which is the astral body, and cleanse yourself. Cleanse the mind body. And I think that the highest form of interdimensional travel is probably through the mind body. Because the mind, the higher consciousness, it's the closest thing to the divine. It's that part of us that we separated from, we descended down to have this earthly experience, according to the Theosophists. Yeah, moving on. Heaven's dewdrop glittering in the morn's first sunbeam within the blossom of the lotus, when dropped on earth becomes a piece of clay. Behold, the pearl is now a speck of mire. Strive with thy thoughts unclean before they overpower thee. Use them as they will thee. For if thou sparest them and they take root and grow, know well these thoughts will overpower and kill thee. Beware, disciple, suffer not, even though it be their shadow to approach. For it will grow, increase in size and power, and then this thing of darkness will absorb thy being before thou hast well realized the black foul monster's presence. And I went through that very experience the last few years. Before the mystic power can make of thee a god, Lanu, thou must have gained the faculty to slay thy lunar form at will. The self of matter and the self of spirit can never meet. One of the twain must disappear. There is no place for both. Thy soul's mind can understand, the bud of personality must be crushed out. That's what it's really saying. The worm of sense destroyed past resurrection. That's what it's really saying. Thou canst not travel on the path before thou hast become the path itself. What is the path? God. Let thy soul lend its ear to every cry of pain, like as the lotus bears its heart to drink the morning sun. Let not the fierce sun dry one tear of pain before thyself has wiped it from the sufferer's eye. But let each burning human tear drop on thy heart and there remain, nor ever brush it off until that pain that caused it is removed. These tears, O thou of heart, most merciful, these are the streams that irrigate the fields of charity immortal. 'Tis on such soil that grows the midnight blossom of Buddha. More difficult to find, more rare to view than is the flower of the bogey tree. It is the seed of freedom from rebirth. It isolates the arhat both from strife and lust. It leads him through the fields of being into the peace and bliss known only in the land of silence and non-being. Kill out desire, but if thou killest it, take heed lest from the deed. Kill out desire, but if thou killest it, take heed lest from the dead it should again rise. Meaning that this is a constant, continuous struggle. I was reading from the Enneads, and who was talking about how the sage, the adept, can maintain happiness, attain a state of happiness, and remain there for the rest of their life. And then he mentioned this specific torture device that was used during those times in ancient Greece, where a person was put inside a bull, and underneath there was flames, and you could hear the cries of pain from the people that were inside. And he said that even in such a situation, the sage can maintain this happiness, and maybe the word happiness was something more like peace, could have meant something slightly different. These are all translations, bear in mind, from ancient languages. And he said that, of course, one would have to do some heavy thinking in that position. It would take quite a little bit of effort to remain in contact with the higher self. And in a way, he was also pointing to the fact that it's a constant dialogue between the human self and the God self that maintains one's path on this path of adeptship and mysticism. Kill love of life, but if thou slayest tanha, let this not be for the first of life eternal, but to replace the fleeting by the everlasting. Desire nothing, chafe not at karma, nor at nature's changeless laws, but struggle only with the personal, the transitory, the evanescent, and the perishable. Help nature and work on with her, and nature will regard thee as one of her creators and make obeisance. I don't know how to pronounce that. And she will open wide before thee the portals of her secret chambers, lay bare before thy gaze the treasures hidden in the very depths of her pure virgin bosom. Unsullied by the hand of matter, she shows her treasures only to the eyes of spirit, the eyes which never close, the eye for which there is no veil in all her kingdoms. Then will she show thee the means and the way, the first gate and the second, the third up to the very seventh, and then the goal, beyond which lie, bathed in the sunlight of the spirit, glories untold, unseen by any save the eye of the soul. But there is but one road to the path, at its very end alone, the voice of the silence can be heard. The ladder by which the candidate ascends is formed of rungs of suffering and pain. These can be silenced only by the voice of virtue. Woe then to thee, disciple, if there is one single vice thou hast not left behind, for then the ladder will give way and overthrow thee. Its foot rests in the deep mire of thy sins and failings, and ere thou canst attempt to cross this wide abyss of matter, thou hast to lave thy feet in waters of renunciation. Beware lest thou shouldest set a foot still soiled upon the ladder's rung, the ladder's lowest rung. Woe unto him who dares pollute one rung with miry feet. The foul and vicious mud will dry, become tenacious, then glue his feet unto the spot, and like a bird caught in the wily fowler's lime, he will be stayed from further progress. His vices will take shape and drag him down. His sins will raise their voices, like as the jackals laugh and sob after the sun goes down. His thoughts become an army and bear him off a captive slave. Kill thy desires, Lanu. Make thy vices impotent, ere the first step is taken on the solemn journey. Strangle thy sins and make them dumb forever, before thou dost lift one foot to mount the ladder. Silence thy thoughts and fix thy whole attention on the Master whom yet thou dost not see, but whom thou feelest. Merge into one sense thy senses, if thou wouldest be secure against the foe. 'Tis by that sense alone which lies concealed within the hollow of thy brain, that the steep path which leadeth to thy Master may be disclosed before thy soul's dim eyes. Long and weary is the way before thee, O disciple. One single thought about the past that thou hast left behind will drag thee down, and thou will have to start the climb anew. To get to these conclusions, it's quite a while longer, so I will stop there. I recommend everyone to get one of these themselves. There is an infinite well of wisdom and information in this book. Now, I know everything's a bit of a mess over here with my lighting and my setup and my camera and the batteries and all of these things, but I couldn't leave this episode another day. And all the other aesthetic things will gradually get better as the show goes on. Thank you for your patience and thank you for your support. And of course, thanks again for tuning in, and see you all next time. I hope this moved you and inspired you. The animals are making a lot of noise. Thank you, guys. I'm not used to having someone else in the other room when I'm talking, so it's a little weird.